news media at the end of the 6 sessions. These workshops are organized in high school, so the students are between 15 and 18 years old. To measure the effects of these news media education activities, I designed a questionnaire, and I came during the first session of the workshop to ask the student to complete this questionnaire. And then I came back 6 weeks later, so during the last session of the workshop, to ask them to complete this questionnaire a second time. And the idea is to measure the difference in their answers between the first and the last session. This questionnaire is a written questionnaire that focuses on the 6 dimensions I mentioned before. There are open-ended questions, close-ended questions with MCQ and skills. It could be done online or on paper and took approximately 30 minutes to be completed. And we also added social demographic questions to see if there are any differences in the answers depending on the profile of the students. So now I'm coming to the trust in the media part. So this part of the questionnaire is based on Maxwell et al. Previous work. They designed a self-declared scale about 8 items on skepticism and trust. And the idea is to indicate if you disagree or agree with the item. The problem is Maxwell et al. Work on university students in the USA. And I'm working with high school students in France. So the context and the participants are very different. And I had to change a little bit the items. So here in this table, you can see in the first column the original items. In the second one, the French translation, if some of you speak French. And in the last column, the retranslation for this presentation. So you can see the differences between the first column and the last one. So the 8 items are: I think the news media are fair. I think the news media don't tell us everything, and this one is a reverse-coded items, which means that if you say I totally agree with that, it means that you don't really trust the news media. I think the news media are accurate. I think the news media can be trusted. I think the news media prioritize being first to report a story. It's also a reverse-coded item. I think the news media gets in the way of society solving its problem. Reverse-coded item. I trust the media to report the news fairly, and I have confidence in the people running the institutions of the press. So for each of the items, the people had to indicate if they agree or disagree. I collected my data between November 2023 and May 2024. So I met about 200 pupils, and 139 have completed both pre- and post-test. They are between 15 and 18 years old, and there are more girls than boys. I went in 6 classrooms that have participated in the news media activities, and I also went in 3 classrooms that haven't participated in the activities, so they constitute control groups. The idea of a control group is to really observe, and the idea is to be able to explain the changes by the fact that people participate in the media education activities, and also to control the biases of my questionnaire. So now I'm going to do little statistics. I'm really sorry, but I will try to make it the most clear as possible. The first thing we wanted to do was to measure an average score of trust. So to do that, in statistics, you have to measure the Cronbach's alpha. The problem was that with the 8 items of the scale, the alpha value was below 0.7. That means that we cannot measure trust. The scale is not reliable to measure trust if we take the 8 items. But we observed that if we removed the 3 reverse-coded items, the alpha value increased and is of over 0.7. So we can take these 5 items to measure a global trust score. I hope everyone has understand. So that's what we did. For each of the answers possible, so strongly disagree to strongly agree, we rated that from 0 to 4 points. And we can observe that the progression between the 2 groups on their average level of trust increased for the test group and decreased for the control group. So the difference is statistically significant. But you can see in this table for the post-test that the level of trust is very, very low because it's below the mean, below 2 out of 4 points. So that raised a new question. What is the point of doing news media literacy? Do we want people to have a perfect 4 out of 4 points level of trust? We want them to completely trust everything they see, everything they hear. I personally don't think it's a good idea, because that would mean that they just blindly believe everything. They aren't critical on what they see. But I think that we don't have them to be completely skeptical either. So we have to find an in-between. And that's why we decided to compare their level of trust with the level of trust of journalists. So we asked journalists to complete this part of the questionnaire to see what are their level of trust. This is what this chart shows. So here in orange you can see the level of trust of the young people during the pre-test. In green the level of trust of young people during the post-test. And in purple the level of trust of journalists. As you can see here, for these 3 first items, the level of trust of journalists are very higher than the level of trust of the young people. So what to do with that? We can also see that for the first item and the third item, so I think the news media are fair and I think the news media can be trusted. The control group decreased its level of trust between the 2 questionnaires, and the test group increased its level of trust. And the differences of their progression are statistically significant. So that means that we can explain, maybe, these changes due to the fact that the test groups has participated in the news media education activities. For the second item, I think the news media are accurate. Both of the groups have increased their level of trust. For the 2 last items, we can see that the level of trust of journalists is closer to the level of trust of the students. And here we can see that the last item, I have confidence in the people running the institutions of the press. The difference between the 2 groups is also statistically significant, but the test group stays stable between the 2 questionnaires, and the control group really decreased its level of trust. So that means that there are some external factors that have played a role in these results. So what can we say about that? We can say that there is a positive progression in the test group between the 2 questionnaires. So the media education activities have a positive effect on the level of the trust. But you can also see that there is a regression in the control group, so there are external factors. And maybe that participating in the news media education activities reduce the effects of these external factors. That also raised the question of what is the perfect score to achieve, to trust. And also we can see that obviously the expectations of the trust differ between the audience and the professional. Journalists have a higher score of trust than the students, and I think it's normal. I wanted to end this presentation with some limitations of this research and some perspectives. The first limitation is about the trust scale. So the problem here is that people have to indicate if they agree or disagree, but they cannot say it depends on the media, because here news media is considered as a unit. So that is the first limitation of this research. Second limitation is that, as you can see, I don't have many people. And also the test group has a bigger sample than the control group. So that can have an effect in the results I presented. And also, I absolutely have no idea of how the news are being discussed in the classrooms between the sessions of the workshops for the test group and between the 2 questionnaires for the control group. I don't know if the teachers talk to their young people about the news, about journalism, and so on. So maybe these are external factors and I don't have any control on that. For the perspectives, as I said, I started my PhD thesis 2 years ago, so I still have 2 years to go. The first thing I will do is to collect more data for the control group, maybe to rebalance the results. And also, in the second phase of my thesis, the aim is to adapt the workshops to compare different kinds of workshops. So maybe the adaptations will have different effects on the level of trust, but I can't say that right now. And so if you're interested, don't hesitate to contact me in the next 2 years. And also, here I talked about the level of trust as an independent dimension, but I truly believe that this is not the real case. Like, it has to be connected with other dimensions, such as the ability to judge the reliability of the news media, the information practices of the youth, and their motivation to stay informed. Because these are the things we can maybe act on to help them to develop a more critical level of trust on news literacy and on the media in general. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, thank you so much for being strict with time. And now I will give the floor to Margarida Maneta, that from Lusófona University, that is doing a presentation on bringing young people close to the journalistic process, reflections on digital newsroom from the EU and Digital Project.
Good morning, buenos dias, bom dia. Eu vou fazer a minha apresentação em português, muito em particular porque se trata de uma redação que é feita por jovens e para jovens. Eu vejo vários jovens nesta plateia, motivo que me impela a falar em português, muito em particular por falar com eles. Esta apresentação surge no âmbito de um projeto baseado na Universidade de Lusófona, projeto UN Digital, que, como o próprio nome indica, é sobre jovens, notícias e cidadania digital. E hoje eu estou aqui em representação de um trabalho feito com algumas colegas que inclusive estão aqui, a Maria José Brites e a Lúcia Mesquita, mas também a Marisa Torres da Silva e a Mariana Moura. Para começar por vos apresentar um bocadinho o projeto. Este é um projeto que, como eu tive a oportunidade de dizer, está sediado na Universidade de Lusófona e é financiado pela Fundação para a Tecnologia, para a Ciência e para a Tecnologia, e que procura perceber quais é que são as ligações dos jovens com as notícias, tendo como enquadramento a cidadania digital. E, portanto, é um projeto que se foca nos interesses, nas necessidades e nos próprios processos de socialização para as notícias dos jovens residentes em Portugal, muito em particular no âmbito da escola, da faculdade, da família e dos amigos e colegas. E para entender este enquadramento e estas dinâmicas com um aprofundamento e em detalhe da realidade portuguesa, o projeto iniciou por fazer uma revisão de literatura Prisma, muito extensiva, de 10 anos e depois avançou para o trabalho de campo, em que realizámos um inquérito representativo a nível nacional online a 1.362 jovens e depois partiu-se para entrevistas semi-estruturadas com jovens e com as pessoas que influenciam esses jovens e que foram por eles indicadas, ao passo que íamos fazendo também alguns diários. No entanto, este é um projeto que não tem como objetivo, transferir o conhecimento apenas dentro da academia, não é? Pretende trazê-lo para fora das portas da academia e ter aqui alguma transferência de conhecimento e impacto, motivo pelo qual foi criada uma redação digital e também um momento de formação, mas realmente aquilo que está na base desta apresentação hoje é esta redação digital e que é aqui um eixo fundamental deste projeto pela sua própria abordagem participatória e que eu vou falar então nos próximos 10 minutos. A redação UN Digital, ela, enfim, é um output deste projeto, mas que tenta capturar aquilo que nós vemos na literatura e vemos também em algumas das apresentações que têm sido aqui hoje feitas e apresentadas, em que realmente as práticas de consumo noticioso elas são muito digitais e se por um lado elas, o cruzamento com as notícias, por um lado ele é de certa forma acidental, por outro ele é também muito seletivo e personalizado. E por esse mesmo motivo pensar em criar uma redação para jovens teria, logicamente, de ser uma redação digital, porque acreditamos, claro, que este aspecto tem muita influência na própria investigação sobre jovens, mas também na forma de criarmos algo que lhe acrescente valor e que gere interesse. Esta não é, no entanto, uma redação feita dentro da academia a partir daquilo que os investigadores e as investigadoras conhecem. É uma redação que parte de um processo de co-criação. Portanto, os jovens estiveram sempre no centro da criação desta redação, não só porque queríamos chegar às múltiplas linguagens que estes falam, mas também porque queríamos estar alinhados não só com a Agenda 2030, mas também, paralelamente, com aqueles que são os seus tópicos de interesse. E, portanto, no fundo estamos a falar de uma redação que dialoga, de certa forma, com tarefas anteriores do projeto, logicamente, mas também com aqueles que se esperam ser os interesses dos jovens e que procuramos corresponder, não só porque, pensando em projetos de literacia que têm normalmente os jovens como utilizadores finais, a literatura tem-nos também mostrado que quando eles são coprodutores conseguem captar muito melhor os seus pares. E por isso a redação UN Digital foi feita nesta lógica de bottom-up, uma abordagem bottom-up, e também tendo-nos no centro do processo, pensando que nós, investigadores e investigadoras, não somos o nosso próprio utilizador. Portanto, não faria sentido fazer uma redação para jovens que tivesse apenas as nossas considerações sobre o que é que seria necessário. E, portanto, não só tivemos, claro, tudo aquilo que as tarefas anteriores do projeto nos diziam sobre como é que deveria ser uma redação para jovens, mas também aproveitámos para fazer algumas entrevistas a jovens que são e eram ciências da comunicação, alguns deles a introduzir-se em algumas redações, não apenas em Portugal, porque a ambição é que seja uma redação mundial e por isso fizemos também algumas entrevistas com jovens em África para conseguirmos capturar a diversidade e a partir daí nós percebemos quais é que eram as funcionalidades essenciais para esta redação e falamos, claro, da possibilidade de termos vídeo, de termos imagem, de termos som, além do habitual texto. E, portanto, o objetivo de os ouvir era, logicamente, tentar capturar o seu envolvimento posteriormente e perceber de que forma é que teriam interesse em usar a plataforma, sendo que ela foi testada, não é, antes de ser lançada através de alguns testes de usabilidade. E, portanto, além destas entrevistas, e considerando que não são os investigadores que estão no centro do processo e que são o seu próprio user, ou utilizador final, fizemos algum processo de design thinking, não só com pessoas de comunicação, mas também com pessoas de design e de psicologia, em que todas as ideias contavam e, portanto, nós tentámos perceber o que é que podia motivar os jovens a utilizar a plataforma, quais é que seriam os seus tipos de comportamentos, de interesse, portanto, porque é que aquela plataforma acabaria por lhes acrescentar valor, como é que se iria inserir nas suas rotinas e quais é que seriam os pensamentos que daí surgiriam. E por isso, nós temos aqui só dois exemplos. No fundo, aquilo que fizemos foi criar personas, que no fundo é criar um protótipo de um utilizador que tem diferentes idades, diferentes interesses, diferentes rotinas e perceber como é que a redação acabaria por chegar até eles e porque é que acabaria por gerar interesse para estes jovens, pensando, claro, nos nossos utilizadores finais, quando viessem a existir. Tirando esta parte teórica, não é, em que expliquei aqui como é que este processo foi desenhado ao longo do último ano, a redação acabou por ganhar vida este ano, no início deste ano. Esta é a sua primeira página, um print de alguns meses atrás. Nós temos outros atuais mais à frente, mas é para verem que é uma coisa colorida, com recurso à imagem. A redação foi lançada no início deste ano, em fevereiro, e até há poucos meses já contava com mais de 70 publicações, portanto, e de diferentes pessoas ao longo do globo. Esta redação tem uma parte ali das nossas notícias, portanto, a pessoa publica aquilo que é do seu interesse. Temos também uma parte que é quase uma nuvem de palavras, daquelas que são as categorias mais publicadas na plataforma, e depois temos os desafios quase mensais que nós vamos lançando para tentar também ir ao encontro de algumas temáticas que estão a decorrer a nível mundial e nacional. Antes de publicar, e portanto também há aqui uma lógica de responsabilidade. A redação tem o seu estatuto editorial, que no fundo assenta e explica algumas das regras que é necessário para se publicar nesta redação e quais é que são os formatos possíveis, etc. No fundo, estamos a falar aqui de uma redação que quer capturar a própria diversidade. Portanto, nós tentámos ir ao encontro de diferentes backgrounds quando criámos a redação e tentamos agora capturá-los para dentro da própria plataforma e, por isso, a plataforma aceita textos em diferentes línguas. Portanto, estamos a falar de português, espanhol, inglês, francês e italiano, as línguas que nós conseguimos compreender, na verdade. E para já é uma plataforma em que a publicação é moderada, ou seja, nós fazemos uma leitura daquilo que nos chega, mas pode não ser assim no futuro, não é? Também é uma plataforma que não está estática, é uma plataforma que vai evoluindo e que se vai adaptando às necessidades e que está muito relacionada com a promoção dos direitos humanos e com a Agenda 2030, no sentido em que procuramos capturar temáticas como, por exemplo, a desinformação, que se falava aqui há pouco, mas também a igualdade de género ou outros temas como, por exemplo, a agenda climática estão entre aqueles que também procuramos dar resposta. A propósito dos desafios que eu falava há pouco, são desafios mensais que nós vamos lançando, normalmente estão relacionados com efemérides, outras vezes nem tanto, podem estar relacionados com parcerias que vamos fazendo, mas a título de exemplo eu gostava de dar aqui o exemplo de um dos temas em que realmente tivemos mais publicações e que está relacionado com uma efeméride portuguesa, no caso 25 de Abril, em que jovens de diferentes localizações no país foram respondendo e mandando os seus textos, mas esta redação também aceita textos e tem assinalado datas de forma espontânea, como aconteceu, por exemplo, com o dia 7 de março, Dia Internacional da Mulher, em que nós, a redação tinha sido tão recentemente lançada, não lançámos nenhum desafio e os jovens, por espontânea iniciativa, acabaram por enviar vários contributos. Eu dizia há pouco que é uma redação feita de jovens para jovens a nível mundial e acho que estamos mesmo em condições de o afirmar, porque temos algumas publicações de jovens residentes em Macau, por exemplo, que já contribuíram para esta redação. Bom, o tempo corre, eu vou encaminhando-me para o fim, trazendo aqui algumas notas finais sobre também a forma como os métodos tradicionais e até os métodos mais participativos acabam por conseguir aqui conciliar na investigação sobre jovens, procurando o seu envolvimento ativo, procurando responder à diversidade de contextos e também possibilitando que os jovens se aproximem mais do processo jornalístico como uma forma também de cimentar a confiança neste processo. Mesmo para terminar, eu deixo somente aqui os desafios que temos agora neste momento a decorrer, um deles em parceria com um projeto na Universidade do Minho e um outro sobre saúde mental. Tem aqui um QR Code bem grande que eu espero que os jovens lá atrás lancem os telemóveis agora. É verdade que nós temos realmente tido muito mais contributos de jovens universitários, mas nós temos também a ambição de conseguir jovens em idade escolar, motivo pelo qual agora vamos também lançar algumas parcerias nesse sentido e que divulgaremos a seu tempo. E, portanto, encaminhando-me para o fim, eu deixo apenas um convite para acederem ao nosso site, em que também temos, ao site do projeto em si, digo, em que nós também temos feito algumas, enfim, parcerias com o próprio projeto MediaTrust.Lab, que hoje recebe esta conferência, não é? E que também estão neste site disponíveis e que convido, claro, a visitar. Obrigada.
Thank you so much, Margarida, and I will now give the floor to Jin Yang Wang from University of South Florida, and also Grace Ficada, right? That will talk about resilient joy, how journalists use humor to cope, engage with troubled audiences. The floor is yours.
Okay. Because it's on the YouTube. Because it's on YouTube.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jinyoung Hwang. I'm here with my colleague Grace Vicara. This paper was also co-authored by Dr. Kristen Orlando and Dr. Gregor Flor, who provided valuable insight and guidance throughout the research. We will present our study titled Resilient Joy, How Journalists Use Humor to Cope with Working Expectations. I will present the overall structure of our study, and Vicara will present our study's methodology and findings and discussions. We are from, all of us are from University of South Florida, Tampa, Florida. As we are from Florida, the phrase hurricanes have on speed dial. Now, another hurricane is approaching to Florida right now. So let's begin with hurricane-related meme. Fire at the hurricane to stop it. Said a meme that went viral as Hurricane Milton approached Florida last month. In a true Floridian spirit, residents responded to the looming disaster with humor. When people outside Florida worry about hurricane, Floridians like to say, "Don't even talk to me, it's category 11. For reference, the strongest hurricane category is 5. Hurricane, not hurricane, humor doesn't just serve as a coping mechanism for Floridians. It's a strategy used by journalists who face unprecedented challenges like emotional toll of reporting on crisis, precarious working conditions, and exacerbated global events like COVID-19, rapid digitalizations. In this research, we explore how journalists navigate the immense pressure of their work and how humor in the form of resilient joy enables them to cope with these challenges. Let's look at research framework. This study is inspired by Perry Park's concept of joy as a news value. Parks, a professor at Michigan State University, argues that incorporating news values into journalism not only enhances audience engagement, but also provides a more valued perspective on news content. To explore this, we conducted in-depth interviews with 21 journalists from across the United States. We focused on two central research questions. First, how does resilient joy allow journalists to cope with difficult working expectations? Second, how does humor help journalists manifest other forms of joy? Let's look at three classes of joy. First, altruistic joy. This type of joy comes from serving others through reporting. Journalists often view their work as a way to make a positive impact on society and community where they live, whether it's informing the public, holding power accountable, or giving a voice to the voiceless. Second, this type of joy focuses on personal satisfaction journalists derive from their work. It's a sense of fulfillment that comes from knowing they are contributing to meaningful stories, growing professionally, and pushing their creative boundaries. Lastly, resilient joy. This is about using humor and emotional resilience to cope with the challenges of their profession. Let's look at resilient joy and how it manifests in the workplace. Resilient joy includes mechanisms like humor, gratitude, and compassion. Among these joy, humor plays a particularly significant role. As highlighted by Dalai Lama and his co-authors, humor has a unique ability to transform pain and adversity into connection. By finding lightness even in the challenging situations, people can foster understanding, build a relationship, and create a sense of shared resilience. Humor operates through three key mechanisms. First, superiority. This involves laughing at others' misfortune. While it may sound harsh, it's a natural part of human behaviors and often used as a satire or political humor to critique those in positions of power. It allows people to process difficult realities, enable them to turning them to something referable. Second, incongruity. This is about the unexpected. Humor arises when our expectations are set in one direction, and then something unexpected or something out of place happens. For example, in journalism, incongruity emerges during crisis, creating unobserved moments that ease tension. The last is the third mechanism is relief. This is the release of stress and tension through rest. Let's take a close look at the role humor plays in journalism. First, emotional relief in high-stress profession. Second, humor fosters camaraderie within newsrooms. Third, humor strengthens connection with audiences. Now, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Grace.
Hi everybody, again, my name is Grace. So first, when we talk about resilient joy, this was a qualitative study, so it was through interviews. We want to make sure what these journalists are thinking of when they think of working expectations, right? So what does it take to be a journalist and how are they feeling when they enter the newsroom? So in order to cope with these working expectations, we've talked a lot about resilience from like a work-life balance. Usually when you're a journalist, there is no work-life balance. It's 24/7 all the time, and with the digital age, you can't really disconnect anymore, right? So we see that like you're always on your Twitter, your Instagram, your X, etc. now in the digital age, especially among young people. So there's no set off time, there's no I'm done working now, with how rapid news changes. So on the screen, there are going to be quotes from the journalists that we spoke to, which is providing a lot of insight for us. So when they're coping with working expectations, a lot of these journalists mentioned camaraderie. So camaraderie within the newsroom, within each other, kind of laughing with each other, even if the story itself wasn't necessarily funny. Having somebody in the newsroom to speak to and to have kind of bounce those ideas off of each other was a really influential part of this humor that we see. Joy in mentorship as well, so finding a mentor, and mentorship also was prominent in gender too, like women in sports finding another woman who was also in sports, and they could kind of joke with each other and laugh with each other and have their own type of special relationship. So that was cool to see as well. So when we talk about humor, we're talking about it as a bolster for resilient joy. So finding humor in news events, funny things happening. We had one journalist tell us about a streaker who ran through the field in the middle of a presentation. So that was very interesting. And the main takeaway from this being that journalists want to find the joy in their stories as much as their audiences do. So how do we provide a new perspective that journalism isn't just we want to cover the bad, the ugly. There's more to it than that, and as human beings, we find the joy in things as well, in kind of humanizing ourselves as journalists. So when we talk about precarity, we talk about kind of the unsteady nature of journalism, right? Again, kind of the 24/7, now especially in the United States. Donald Trump and the villain, he's kind of villainized the news. We see that a lot. So with this unsteady nature, we talk about how knowing when to laugh and knowing when to take things seriously. Journalists view stress kind of on a scale, right? So laughing through the pain is how a lot of journalists describe it. When you stress, you can either make a joke out of it or you can completely freak out, right? So we kind of our study is focused on how journalists find the joy. So this is a qualitative study. It highlights the role of humor within resilient joy and bolstering joy more broadly, especially when it comes to journalist and audience perspectives, and how that we can bridge connection through our young audiences. So instead of using new tricks, this study uses old tricks, which is just humanizing the journalist through humor, finding the laughter in our storytelling, establishing trust by emphasizing that journalists have humor-driven perspectives just like their audiences do. They want to find the joy, and all 21 of our journalists expressed feeling like reaching out through humor was the way to connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, last but not least, we will have a presentation on the role of public relations in disinformation and media literacy in Portugal with E. Chizek from University of Texas, Austin.
Yes.
Precisa de ler as notas.
It's good. Presenter.
Good morning. afternoon. Bom dia. No, is it bom dia or is it boa tarde?
Bon dia.
Bom dia, because we haven't eaten lunch yet, right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Oh, there I am. I'm famous. I'm glad I got a haircut. I'm gonna use comedy because it's helps us be resilient, yes, in a moment of informational precarity and media distrust. This is not part of my presentation. I am not a comic, I am a professor. Okay. Shall we begin? It was better when I was making jokes, I think. Okay, let's see. So, welcome, thank you. I'm going to do my presentation in English, if that's okay. If you have questions and feel more comfortable with Portuguese, my co-author and co-investigator, Nuno Brito, is here, and so he can chat with you if you'd like a little bit more. Okay. Sorry, my dad and my wife are joining on the live stream, so let me close my WhatsApp. Okay, so I'm joining this morning, I'm in Portugal for my sabbatical. I'm a professor at the University of Texas in Austin, but I'm in Portugal for the semester, living in Estoril and walking my dog on the Pardal along Cascais. And my friend and colleague, Nuno, and I are doing research on the role of public relations and misinformation, specifically in the context of monkeypox, the monkeypox outbreak that happened globally. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what we've been doing and what we have been thinking about. As we know, in the dynamic communication landscape, misinformation really poses a significant challenge to media integrity and public understanding of issues. So a lot of the work has been largely in media studies and journalism, but I think that there is a role to play for our colleagues and scholars and practitioners in public relations. And before you get worried about what I mean by public relations, I have a very broad understanding of what public relations is. It is not just corporate reputation management in social media and events planning. I'm thinking about the strategic role of information dissemination by way of communication campaigns. And so I'll hopefully get you to expand your thoughts here about public relations. And thinking about how leveraging expertise in media literacy, message framing, and stakeholder engagement, we are arguing that public relations can really help serve a critical tool for scholars, practitioners, and activists as well to understand and to combat misinformation. As we know, misinformation really thrives in environments where trust is eroded, and public relations has a long history here of fostering trust between organizations and communities and the public. And so there's this intersection, this nexus, which we believe is important for us to investigate more deeply. So by bridging some of the theory, there's a lot of people taking pictures of me right now. It's good because I got a haircut, I said, my barber, he'll be proud. His name is also Nuno. If you need a recommendation, he's right by the São João train station in Israel. Okay, sorry for my jokes. Americans, when we get nervous, we make jokes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the context of our project here, though. In our project, we're examining misinformation surrounding monkeypox in the gay community largely, and the histories in which that comes from these histories of stigmatization and false narratives. When monkeypox began in early 2022, there was a wide misinformation that this illness affected gay and bisexual men. While there has been a significant number of cases early on of this community, of gay men, monkeypox was not a virus that was exclusive to sexual orientation, nor was it a sexually transmitted disease. but rather transmitted through physical contact, skin-to-skin contact. However, there was a focus on LGBTQ populations, which has led to stigma and falsely labeling monkeypox as a gay disease, which is similar to the ways in which media and journalism and government covered HIV and AIDS in the 1980s and 1990s, if you remember, or if you were not young enough, or if you were not old enough to remember that, maybe part of your histories of communication, you've learned that. In Portugal, like in other parts of Europe, monkeypox has disproportionately affected gay men. And there were public health campaigns that were launched to educate and protect groups, but there was a lot of stigma and misinformation in the ways in which media coverage in Portugal played out here. So there were efforts made to encourage non-stigmatizing approaches to public health messaging and framing, and Portuguese authorities and health institutions called for the inclusion of LGBTQ communities and activists in the solution of the process, recognizing the need for accurate information and support. But despite these efforts, the association between monkeypox and gay men persisted in the public narrative, contributing to fear, discrimination, etc. So let me skip forward a bit here. For the context of this paper and this chapter and this conference, my collaborator and I are really focusing on a cultural context of misinformation to really see the ways in which misinformation is shaped by and is deeply embedded within sociocultural beliefs, biases, stereotypes, and prejudices of a society. Rather than just looking at misinformation as a problem of individual knowledge or technology, the cultural context framework here is looking at these larger cultural and social dynamics. So what did we do? Or what are we doing? We're engaging in a case study in which we've identified key individuals who were points of power, points of information, and we have conducted in-depth interviews with 5 individuals at this point and are using those as jumping off points for the work we're doing. So I'll go back to the first one here. So this sampling approach allowed us to focus on specific individuals and their firsthand experiences and insights into the strategies and challenges and ethical considerations that shape the communication efforts during the health crisis. And so we identified participants who played key roles in the information dissemination and tackling misinformation during the monkeypox outbreak in Portugal. So these are the 5 individuals, and I'll share with you some of the insights from these conversations. Okay. And from our analyses. By and large, our participants expressed frustration with public figures who misused their authority to make uninformed or prejudiced statements that amplified misinformation. So for example, several people referred to Vitor Duque and how experts like him misuse their status to spread bias under the guise of scientific authority, which complicates public understanding of health issues. According to the framework, the cultural context framework, combating misinformation really requires we address authoritative sources who contribute to that biased narrative. So early reporting and framing by both media and public health agencies really tied monkeypox to specific groups, namely men who have sex with other men, gay men, bisexual men. This echoes historical narratives associated with disease in marginalized communities, including HIV and AIDS, in which communities become further stigmatized and which further entrenches cultural bias. The journalists we spoke with discussed the challenges in avoiding framing monkeypox as solely an LGBTQ issue in working to humanize those individuals rather than labeling them as vectors of disease, right? So these discussions suggest that there's underlying biases and stereotypes that work to perpetuate these perceptions and then resulted in public misconceptions about the population, right? Work that was done in the 1990s and early 2000s to tackle stigma and stereotypes resurfaced in 2022. Okay. We also spoke with government health officials. The director, I'm sorry, I'll share it with you. The head of communication at DGS worked closely with nonprofit organizations and NGOs and behavioral scientists to counter misinformation and stigmatizing narratives. By working with NGOs, they were able to tap into spaces that already had established trust with marginalized communities, which is really essential to building a credible and inclusive communication strategy. And again, this supports the cultural context of misinformation and helping reduce misinformation by addressing it from multiple perspectives and making sure that communication resonates with the very communities in which you're trying to engage and to change behavior. So the DGS team utilized community-centered messages. They worked with specific communities to tailor public health messaging. They worked with organizations, community groups, to really understand how health information was both received and interpreted. It's also important to note that there is frustration amongst our participants that society has not learned from historical moments such as HIV and AIDS, where this similar stigmatizing narrative has caused lasting harm to sexual and gender minorities, especially as it has been perpetuated by government officials and media sources and media entities. So, what role does public relations have to play in all of this? As public relations and media relations professionals work in these information environments, it's important that we recognize the role that these individuals play at the intersection of public health and media and journalism and information. Practitioners work to ensure that accurate and science-based information is widely disseminated to counteract false claims and stereotypes. For instance, during the monkeypox outbreak, public health authorities stressed that while gay men were disproportionately affected, the virus could really spread to anyone through close contact. Public relations has a role to play here, both practically and ethically, in communicating that this particular disease is not a gay disease and can affect all individuals regardless of sexual orientation, right? There's a public health dimension here that is at stake. So by crafting health information and non-stigmatizing messaging, they can ensure public receives accurate information. In health crises like monkeypox, practitioners manage crisis communication strategies. They coordinate messages across different communication channels, including social media, traditional media. They issue press releases. They hold public hearings and conferences, information sessions, explaining the ways the virus transmits, communicating prevention methods without perpetuating stigma. One of the challenges during the monkeypox outbreak was the stigma attached to gay and LGBTQ populations. And so there's a role to be played here by the public relations discipline as well as scholars and practitioners in order to combat this misinformation. Practitioners work to establish trust between public health organizations and marginalized communities. In the case of monkeypox, PR efforts that engaged community-based organizations like the ILGA Portugal group and GAT, which were two LGBTQ-based advocacy organizations, those were fundamentally significant in helping rebuild trust and ensure that messages were relevant, respectful, and sensitive to LGBTQ concerns. And by understanding the historical distrust that marginalized communities have toward institutions, public relations can work with media, with journalists, with content creators, with nonprofit organizations and governments to create partnerships and lend credibility to health messages and messaging within a landscape that is incredibly and increasingly polarized. So I'm happy to chat more after this session, or if you see us around, please feel free to say hello. Thank you for your time, for listening.
All of us.
Yes, yes. So please, I'm inviting all the presenters. Thank you all for the so interesting presentations. So at first I will give the floor to the audience. Any questions, doubts? Yes, please, Lucia, go ahead. I will ask, please, when you ask the question or when you make a comment, please just say who you are and from where. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations, very inspiring. I just wanted to make so I'm Lucia Mesquita, I'm from Lusófona University, and I would like to ask a question to the first presentation. I just wonder if you were consider other dimensions like political economy of journalism, ownership, these kind of backgrounds that are quite common in news literacy to discuss. And if you are considering how you're gonna try to engage in this information in your PhD thesis. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I don't measure that, so it's not the dimension that I measure for the young people. But during the workshops, the journalists talk about that in their so the 31st lessons are more theoretical, and they talk about that. And so the idea is to help young people to at least have a conscious of all these differences. In my thesis, I will try to talk about that because I will explain how the workshops are designed and what is the content of the workshops. And also, in the very first part of the thesis, the idea is to explain why news literacy is interesting. So these will obviously be discussed. For the disinformation and fake news and things like that, we don't really like, in my research group, the words fake news, because that means that there are fake news and true news. So we prefer talking about disinformation and misinformation and how to understand what an information is and what are the the objectives of one kind of information. I hope it answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This is an easy audience.
Hello, my name is Lucas. I'm from Brazil and I'm here for 6 months and studying as well 6 months in Portugal. And my English is not that good, but I'm gonna try. My questions are for you and for you. So first, well, your research, it shows that maybe the media literacy doesn't really increase trust. And this makes me think like, is trust really the thing we're looking for? And because we even as journalists, we don't necessarily trust every news media outlet that we read, but we see their importance. So like, what other variables could we consider to see if media literacy is effective, right? And for you, it's like, is there a way to evaluate if humor and joy can convert or generate political action for the journalists to seek for better work conditions and things like that? Thanks, and congratulations for all the presentations.
Thank you for your question. So yeah, as I said in my presentation, I don't think that taking only the level of trust is the point of being user literate and media literate. I think it encompasses more and other dimensions. So in my research, we are also working on the ability to deconstruct the news and to judge the reliability of the news. So I think it's connected to the level of trust. And the idea is to discover what kind of arguments are used by the young people to believe something or to don't believe something. So we are working on that and we try to make connections with that level of trust and these other dimensions. Maybe this is your, yeah. Thank you.
That is such a good question. I would say, as far as humor and joy goes towards political action, right? We see that a lot more on the other side, not so much journalism, but more PR and marketing. So candidates, especially in the United States, like with the most recent election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, Kamala ran pretty much her whole campaign was on humor and joy. So she was posting on, you guys have TikTok, Instagram, obviously, of course. That's how she marketed herself to young people, especially Generation Z in particular. So that, to me, humor and joy, when we're specifically talking about young people, is how scholars in journalism kind of connect to those younger audiences through these kinds of, you have that like digital slang. We see that a lot too. And journalists, that's a really great question. I think using humor in that way kind of creates more buzz around what journalists are talking about. So I see that particularly in headline work, how to kind of like grab those young readers is using that digital slang, that humor, that satire, to kind of connect there. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments?
Okay, I have.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay, it's just that something that we see here when we make like this audience research on disinformation and fake news. In Portuguese, we don't have like misinformation. Everything is desinformação. So in French, I don't know if you had like this difficulty with the terminology, and how did you deal with it? How was it?
So your question is about disinformation, like the words I use with the young people.
Yeah, because disinformation and misinformation are two different things in English, right?
Yeah.
But in Portuguese, it's kind of, we call everything disinformation.
Yeah.
And
in French, sorry, because I come from Belgium. In French, there are also two words, so désinformation and mésinformation. And the difference is disinformation, you want to disinform, so it's like, I think it's like in English, it's like the goal to disinform, and misinformation is more like something is false or not really true, but you don't want that to play a role on the audience. So we use two different words in French.
So we have time for one more last question.
Thank you. My name is Slanka Vasquez-Satwa, and I have a question for Grace. You did research with journalists on how they perceive the audience, and we all know that sometimes journalists perceive audience as a picture in the mirror, like themselves. Have you seen this in your research?
Thank you so much for the question. It's so nice to see your face in person. I would say that journalists' perception of the audience is that the audience, for lack of a better term, does not like them. Does not like them, does not trust them, does not relate to them. So using the humor in the research we saw that they were able to connect with the audience, with the source being kind of like that middleman, you know, because the source is the closest thing you get to the audience usually when you're a journalist, if that makes sense. The source is representing the audiences that will read the piece. So in that way, that's kind of like the mirror that we saw in the research, is that through this humor, through this camaraderie with each other, but with the source as well, that's how they were able to kind of bridge the gap into bringing humor into the audiences and showing audiences like, hey, we're human too, we like to laugh as well, not just with hard news, but soft news as well. Thank you.
So I think we are closing now. Thank you so much, and special thanks to the presenters, and we'll return at 2:30, right?
Just a suggestion to lunch, if you want, you go out on the left, and on the library in the bottom floor you have a kind of canteen, or outside.